asked me during the break, so I'll cover those inshallah, and then
maybe
from there on in we'll finish, right? So the first question someone asked me is that Sam Harris has this idea. So Sam Harris is a very famous atheist, right? He has this question regarding there being a contradiction between faith and reason, right? So he says that faith is blind belief. Is Islam based upon blind belief? So the answer to that is that Islam is not based upon blind belief, meaning you do not just blindly believe and that's it, right? Faith is connected to the heart. In order for you to believe it, the scriptures and the traditional kind of theologians, their position is that faith resides in the heart, meaning that you have to know Allah and you need to believe in God because you understand that there is a creator that is greater than you. So it's not as, like Pascal's wager, where I say yes, I believe in God because, well, if I believe in God, then I'll go to heaven, right? And I'm not really going to have, there's going to be no negative to it. And if I say, well, I don't believe in God, and it turns out there is a God, then I'm going to go to hell, right? That's a very hollow faith to have. And that's not within the Islamic discourse to have, is you just believe and you think, that's it, it's fine. No, the point is that you know Allah. You're created to know your Lord. Even worship, these acts of ibadah, these acts of worship, are seen to be ways of you getting closer to God, ways of you knowing God. I mean, it's not a hollow faith that Sam Harris talks about. So that's the first answer. So yes, anyone else was? Yes.
Do you know if in the Quran or the Sunnah, if there's any evidence for all created objects having a beginning?
All created objects having a beginning?
Or all creation?
Yes, I mean that was the point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sustains things, right? From that verse that I mentioned in Surah Ikhlas. The idea is that in order for something to be sustained, right? For something to be sustained, it must have a beginning. It has to be finite in order for it. It must be dependent, right?
Yes.
It cannot be independent. Okay? So therefore that verse, that was one of the reasons why I kind of talked about it, because cosmological arguments, there's another argument called the argument from contingency, right? Which talks about things being, God being independent and everything else being dependent. So everything else that is possible in existence are dependent things, and God is the independent and necessary being, meaning that they all rely on God. And they're all, obviously, because they're dependent things, they have a beginning and an end, they're finite things. Yes?
So my question's on how you talk about free will. So I want to know, how much free will does someone have? So for example, how much of my future is preordained? So I know, for example, if I had an exam the next day, and I didn't study for it at all, and I stayed up all night praying, give me an A, obviously I'm not going to get that because I didn't do anything on my part to get that A. So, I mean, things like money, success, is that preordained, or do I can I change that as well?
Yeah, so I mean the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and Sheikh Amin will tell you as well, as the fact that there is this idea of destiny and dua fighting with each other all the way until kind of the Day of Judgment, right? Meaning that there is this correlation or this between what is destined for you and also what you can change. So there are some things which are finite and they're within finite for you in terms of they are set and destined for you. But there are other things which are possibilities, right? And those possibilities within God's knowledge are the choices that you choose. So for instance, if I give you the example of the exams, right? God has created those actions and God has created that circumstance to put you in that place, right? Of you sitting an exam. Now the choice is yours. You've been given the rational faculty. you have the idea of deliberation. So you said that you knew the consequence, right, of if you don't study. Okay, if you don't study, what's going to happen? You're going to fail or whatever. You get a C if you're smart, right? So you know that, right? Because you know that, you know the consequences, which is from your mind. You understand that, which are things which God has given you. It's based upon you, those choices that you make. Because God has given you those faculties, because God has given you choices to make. Not only has He given you choices, but He's given you a mind which you can understand and deliberate the consequences of what will happen. Those things are up to you. God has created those possibilities, right? But that choice is your choice to make. Question, yes?
Yes, it's about committing sins and about the qada and qadar. So the God knows that I'm doing bad things. Why should He punish me if He knows already that?
So if God knows that you've done bad things, then why?
If He already knows,
If He already knows
yes,
that you've done
He's
bad
doing
things,
bad,
okay.
why He
Yes.
punish me?
So this is a question that will be asked is, if God knows. The question that was asked was, if God knows that I will do bad things, or God knows that I will do wrong things, then how is it fair for God to punish me, right? How is it fair for God to, is this the question? How is it fair for God then to punish me on this? God's knowledge includes all things which are possibilities, right? So it is possible, so in terms of God's knowledge, right, it is possible for you to do good things, it's possible for you to do bad things, it's possible for you to do things which are in the middle ground, it's impossible for you to not do things as well. God's knowledge encompasses all of those things, right? Okay? Well, one point that you need to kind of understand is this idea of statistics. Statistics, they cover this, and generally Hume, again, I'm coming back to Hume all the time, I think it's Edinburgh thing. He talks about the idea that correlation does not necessarily equal causation. Meaning that just because God has knowledge of all these possibilities, right, doesn't mean that it causes you to do that. You still have free will and choice over those things that you do. Meaning that the choice, remember this was my point that I talked about before, is the fact that God's knowledge is set, it's pre-eternal, okay, and it's set, yes, but God is still actively engaging and actively creating within this world. He's actively still creating actions within this world as well, right? So the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says kun fayakun, be and it is, be and it becomes, consistently meaning that God is a living entity. Al-Hayy is one of his names, okay, meaning that he is a living entity, and Al-Khaliq, the one who creates, the creator, okay, meaning that he is still creating. And we don't say that he created and he left and he knows everything and that's how he left it. Okay, he is still engaging within this world. He is still actively creating within this world, meaning that he can create situations for yourself in which you can do good or which you can do bad. Those possibilities God knows about. Right? God knows those possibilities. However, the choice is yours. Whether you do those right things, whether you do those wrong things. The second point is this idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells you what are right things and what are wrong things, right? God tells you that if you do this, the punishment will be for this. If you do this, this is an immoral act to do, right? It's a wrong thing to do. The reasoning behind it is because God is almost setting those foundations and saying to you, well, you cannot then say to God on the day of judgment, like you said, well, you knew I was going to do evil, right? And it happened. Because God has given you that free will, He's given you those choices to make, and He's told you which acts are immoral, which acts are wrong as well. Okay? So therefore, if you make that choice, you know the consequences of those choices that you make. That's included within God's knowledge, but at the same time, It's you that chooses to do it, even though you know the consequences, even though you know it's a wrong thing to do, even though you know that murder is wrong. If you still do it, right? You can't just say, well, God knew I was going to do it and that's it, so I can't be held responsible, right? Because God has told you, if you do such an act, this is the punishment is the hellfire, etc. That you will be blocked from inheritance because of that in this world, right? You know those punishments.
Is that relative to the qada and qadr? So
Yes.
some people said if I commit some sins, it's something that's already.
No, because that's the point, right? God has told you what are those major sins
No, I mean,
and what are those minor
what's the
sins.
relation between the qada and qadr?
What's
and
the
sins?
relationship between the qada and qadr?
Yeah.
It's like I said, so you are judged, okay, based upon the situations that you have a choice over. So whatever is predestined for you, okay, you're not going to be directly judged upon that. You're going to be judged upon the decisions that you make in this world. Yes, so just that, so that's why it's related, right? Because it's related because of the fact that the qada, whatever is preordained for you, okay, whatever you do with that, for instance, money, which you might say is predestined for you, right, to get that amount of money, the choice is yours on what you do with it. That is what you will be judged upon.
I think this summarizing ayah قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها. So you have two options. Another ayah إنا هديناه النجدين إما شاكرا وإما كفورا. So we choose. But his knowledge is, as Sheikh mentioned, is not force us, is not enforcing us to do so. It's our will.
Yes. There's no coercion, right, in religion, and the same thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about when it comes even to non-Muslims is there is no compulsion in religion. If God is not forcing you to do anything, He's laying out, as the brother mentioned these verses, He's not forcing you to do anything, it's your choice that you're making. And like I said, if you choose to do that, that's regarded as a virtuous thing to do.
Yeah, I remember there was a story between Umar ibn Khattab and other guy who stole something, and he said that was qada and qadr. And Umar ibn Khattab said, and to cut or chop your hand, that would be also qada and qadr. So,
It's Umar radiallahu anhu as well,
Yes.
that's very good on
Yes.
these points. That's a good point. Yes? Anyone else?
Even about qada qadar is more than one qada. So like Umar ibn Khattab the same when he was going to travel to Sham, see a bag or no, and then there was disease, and some people they say because he chose the protection, not to escape. They said, are you run away escaping? He said, well, I'm escaping from qadar to another qadar. So that's why when he said about the guy who chopped his hand, because you choose to chop your hand by selecting this qadar, and then you know the consequences, isn't it? Yeah.
Anyone else? Yes, yes.
So are you basing God's existence on the evidence base that the universe wasn't still and they found that, areas of the realm were moving, therefore there's something behind that? Because
Yes.
at the beginning,
Yes, because at the beginning something must have created it, or
so
something
it
must
was
have caused
based
it.
on the fact that
So
something was moving.
That's
the
not-
beginning of.
it had a starting point, right? So the idea that because something had a starting point, something had a beginning, it couldn't have come from itself.
Is
Right.
that the only evidence we're basing it on, the fact that the universe was moving? Somebody had found that through the telescope?
No, not. I mean, there's numerous evidences from that. I mean, there's second law of thermodynamics. There's ideas of. I mean, Ghazali will talk about it from. I use these ones because they were the most straightforward points. But if you wanted to go into more detail, Imam al-Ghazali will talk about this idea of infinites and the impossibility of having an actual infinite rather than a theoretical infinite, right? So he will say, I'll give you an example of this. So he will say that something which is infinity, which just is eternal and always there, okay, which is infinitely expanding. He'll say that this is an actual infinite is impossible, meaning something that exists, right, that has a beginning, and we say it's infinite is impossible. The reasoning behind this, I'll quote him here. So he says that if you were to divide any finite distance in half, and then to fourths, and then to eighths, and into sixteenths, and so on to infinity, right? The number of divisions is potentially infinite, in the sense that you could go on dividing endlessly, but you would never arrive at an infinitive division. So you would never actually have an infinite number of parts of division. Okay, basically meaning that these are things which are in theoretical mathematics. Okay, in theory you can have an infinite, but in actual terms you can never divide an infinite into something and say, yes, that's what it is. Okay, so he's saying that for you to transfer something which is theoretical into something which is in the material world is nonsensical to do that. So that was a kind of point of logic that he kind of makes.
You tend to hear a lot of, if you are a Muslim, one of the beliefs would be the existence of God is to believe in the unknown, and it's something that you need to believe in your heart, this unknown world, which is heaven and hell and things like that. So it is very difficult to believe that on its own without evidence. So therefore I think maybe reading more of this would give me a better understanding, right?
Yeah, but this was the kind of idea that I was positing at the beginning is the fact that I would agree with that statement. I think that generally we have this idea within Muslim theology that you kind of believe in the unknown and you leave it alone, right? And you don't go into an explanation of why you believe in God, or why you believe in the unseen, or why you believe in the Prophet ﷺ, etc. But this is not within theology, right? Within theology, you don't have this idea. So the point that scholars will make is that doing taqleed in terms of aqidah is impermissible, right? So you cannot just say, well, yes, I believe because he believes, and that's it. You have to know God from yourself, and you need to take the time out to understand why you believe in God.
But before you get to know God, so this is just knowledge that I've heard over time, he's the changer of all hearts. So why is everybody hearts not changed into going towards Islam? Why is it more difficult for others? Or the concept of the Quran saying God refers to Muslims, but non-Muslims or Christians are, mentioned in a way that, it's very based on Muslims. So therefore I question sorry, am I complicating it?
No, carry on.
Okay, so, is every person that is born a Muslim, but they revert back? Does God make that happen?
Yes, so every single person is born on fitra, born on a base belief of believing in a deity, right? Believing in a greater being, yes.
So you're saying the good and bad that's done through the goodness of, doesn't matter what ethnicity, background, whatever, Muslims, none, whether you're born as a Muslim, whether you're not, the good or the bad that you do, the hardships which then after that there is ease, is some of it for some people, God is a changer of all hearts and therefore they become Muslim. Those who are not born Muslims.
So those that are not born Muslims?
Yeah.
I don't quite get the question.
See, for example,
Okay.
You talked about God and its existence, and is it referring to just Muslims, or is it referring to non-Muslims and everybody, like everything that you said?
No, it's referring to it's a universal message. It's a universal message to believe, right? The point, the difference that we would talk about in terms of Muslims is Islam didn't come from one nation or one sect or one group. It came for absolutely everyone, right? This is why the Prophet ﷺ is called the mercy to all of mankind. He's been sent to all of mankind, right? And the point the scholars will make is that if you choose out of your own will, your own volition to seek out God and to seek out the truth, then you will find the truth. So that is the onus on yourself. Because in the same way you could say in the other way that people who are born Muslims but may leave the religion as well out of their own choice.
Right, so it is actually, that's
Right.
not in the faith, that is their own free will, that's
So
their choice.
that's my point, right? Is that they, just because you were born into the faith, doesn't necessarily mean that you will leave as a Muslim either. Doesn't mean that you'll necessarily leave on Iman, leave on faith as well, right? There are people who have been born into a Muslim family and then leave the fold as well. In the same way that there are people that haven't been born into a Muslim family but accept the religion as well. So it works both ways. Yes.
Well, I wanted to ask because I have a friend. He's Christian, but not very practicing. He goes to church and everything. And I managed more or less to, given the points, some of the points you've given on this lecture about Allah, and that is only one, that is the sustainer, is the creator, and until that point he accepts that. He rejects the Trinity. He accepts Allah is one. He says that possibly Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was probably a prophet of God. But when I tell him, why don't you accept Islam? He gives me two reasons. First, he says, well, if Allah created me, He put me in a Christian family, and He already knows the future. He knows if I'm going to convert or not, and it's not up to me. And also, on your own book, it says there's no compulsion in religion. So he says, as long as I'm a good person, I don't steal, I don't lie, I don't beat up people, then if everything is okay, I don't need to follow any religion in particular. How would you reply to him?
It seems to be a bit of a cop-out, as if he's kind of agreeing with you, but at the same time he's still attached to his faith. I think it would be an idea of, to be honest, people go through different stages, right, in terms of their faith, etc. And you've proven it. If you've proven it rationally to him and he believes in those things, and he still thinks there is no compulsion in religion, meaning that you're not forcing you to believe, it doesn't mean what he's saying that we're not encouraging you to believe, you just, that's it, you leave it alone. If you're born that way, you're born that way. He still has a choice. If you've presented him with the evidences and you've presented him with a way of showing that his beliefs are wrong or faulty, or whatever word you want to use, and he's agreeing with that concept, right, then that's an idea which he needs to have from within himself to understand that. It's not, I mean, these kind of things of rational concepts, etc., etc., I mean, they're very good in terms of telling people to believe and encouraging them and telling them the right attributes, etc. But I think with a person like this, you've got to show them the other side of Islam, right? You've got to show them the merciful nature of Islam, the kind nature of Islam, the brotherhood element of it, and everything like that they might be missing from their faith. Okay, so it's about showing people holistically what the religion is about. It's not just about rationality and reason. It's a complete way of life, and that's something which you need to then posit to them and advise them about these things as well. Because if they're living that kind of faith, then you've got to question, is your faith, like, how much are you getting out of your faith? Like, okay, you're saying what you're saying and you agree with it, but how much are you then getting out of your faith? It's a very hollow belief to have, right? And that's the questions you then need to ask them, inshallah. There's qadr of Allah.
They come across that there's some prophets or some messengers, their fathers or their families who are non-believer. So it doesn't mean if God chosen you that it will be a good thing for you, because not all your family are, or more for, what can I say, in many cases, there will be one guy that became, subhanAllah, the God guide him for the truth. So it doesn't make sense that you should be Christian or Muslim.
Yes. And that's why you would, look at the stories of the companions, etc. There was the brotherhood element, there was the kind characteristics of the Prophet ﷺ, right, that encouraged people to come to Islam as well. And they could have used those same reasons. There's no compulsion in religion, and moved away from it as well, right? So I think it's something that you need to show them the holistic faith and tarbiyah element of it, and the disciplining the soul, and the hollow faith that you have in comparison to what you could have. Okay? Yes, I think that'll be the last one.
Just kind of following on from that question, because a lot of people, it's that argument, people say, but I'm good, I live a good life. And in this society, people find it really easy to say, well, I live a good life, why do I need anything else? Why do I need a framework? And some people actually run away from religion, like, I don't want this organised religion, so then how do you convince them? For some people, they might think, yeah, I kind of do accept there's a creator out there, but why do I need to do anything with that knowledge? So what's the argument to convince them to actually enter into following a religion or accepting Islam?
I think it's the same kind of response that I was mentioning, is the fact that I think these things actually kind of show an almost failure of the Muslims, right? That it's kind of like, okay, the person is almost halfway there in terms of they understand the beliefs, but they don't understand the benefits from it, because we ourselves as Muslims have not really shown them the benefits of the religion, okay? Because they'll say that they are good people, etc., etc., and that's fine. That's completely fine to say that, but I think it comes from the idea that Muslims generally, if the Muslims were living in accordance to the Quran and Sunnah and were being the best people that they can be, I guarantee you that people would think, well, I want what they have, right? And it would be different from just saying, I'm good. It would be, well, there's something else to it rather than just belief. There's something else to it rather than just rationality, okay? And I think that side of things is really lacking within the Muslim Ummah generally, are these concepts of, you know, the humanity and good nature and everything like that. Because you could say, well, if you're going to receive all of that from the faith, right, and your religion is going to boost and bring up those virtuous characteristics that I talked about, okay, and it's going to increase those virtuous characteristics, okay, that we are discussing, and that you're saying, and you agree with are good things to have, then isn't that not reason enough for you to join the faith? But the problem is, you need to show that, right? It's not as simple as just saying it. People need to see the effect that the religion has on people, and I think that that's something which we as Muslims need to take onus of, and we as Muslims need to be the best example that we can be. Inshallah. Okay.
Obviously, it's an important topic, and the numbers reflect that. And you don't see as many people here except on Eid, perhaps, or Jumu'ah maybe. But Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Hasan, for coming. We're hoping to organise more events, inshallah, in the future. So please, and send any feedback as well to the mosque if you have any suggestions and any way we can improve anything, any ways we can address these kind of issues more. Please send in feedback. Yeah, so there'll be, inshallah, just look out for more events coming. In September, inshallah, the I syllabus will be running in Edinburgh, which Hasan is in a sense a product of that scholarly system. It's a 1-year diploma, Islamic diploma. I encourage everyone to try and do that, to make that commitment. It's one evening a week. You study it, you get a very wide, broad kind of outlook on Islam that gives you a practical understanding, everything you need to know in 1 year, basically. So I would encourage you to look out for that as well, inshallah. We'll put that out as well. So, Jazakallah khair, thanks for coming, everyone. Hope everyone benefit. Hope the questions in their minds were answered, and we'll leave, inshallah, with on that note.